Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching India's World with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. India and South Africa on Friday sealed a 3-year strategic program to further boost cooperation in a number of key areas after talks between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. In his media statement, Prime Minister Modi said both sides discussed all aspects of the bilateral ties with an aim to further expand cooperation in diverse areas. Ramaphosa said his country was looking at a result-oriented partnership with India through implementation of the 3-year strategic exchange program. The strategic program will cover cooperation in a range of areas including defense and security, trade and investment, the blue economy, tourism, IT and agriculture. President Ramaphosa, who arrived in Delhi on Friday morning, was the chief guest at the Republic Day parade on Saturday. It was the 4th meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Ramaphosa within a year. On this edition of India as well, we will analyze the warming of ties between India and South Africa. Joining me on the program today are Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, former ambassador, Sriram Chaulia, Dean, Jindal School of International Affairs, and Major General Dhruv C. Katoch, Director, India Foundation. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of India's World. Ambassador, I'd like to begin the program with you. What were the key takeaways for you as far as President Ramaphosa's visit to India is concerned?
Well, first of all, I think was the timing. Quite apart from the fact that, in the background we have the very visible high priority the present government has been giving to Africa, which is a refreshing change from some decades ago. I mean, if you count the number of visits made by our president, vice president, the ministers and others, it's at an all-time high. The Africa summits, regardless of some complaints on implementation, have been another indicator of this fact, and so on. But the timing, I say, because Cyril Ramaphosa is now heading for elections in South Africa exactly at the same time as we are heading for elections, May 2019. Cyril is an extremely interesting figure. He was one of the leaders of the trade union movement of South Africa, which was, in a sense, the crucible from which the struggle against apartheid was launched over the many years. He was the chief negotiator under Nelson Mandela with the white apartheid regime, which led to the new constitution and independence. And subsequently, he became probably South Africa's most prominent businessman after independence because he joined the world of business. So he's got a trade union background, a business background, and an ANC background as a major ANC leader. So he's got all those credentials that augur well for the ANC, which has been recently under very strong attack from opponents because of the Jacob Zuma regime, which was seen to be utterly and totally corrupt in collaboration with that notorious Gupta family of Indian origin. But with Cyril and whatever little he can manage to do in the short time he has, it looks definitely as though the ANC certainly will be in the majority. The opposition Democratic Party is still seen to a large extent as the white party, even though they are trying to change that. So the fact that he is visiting at this time as the chief guest of our Republic on our Republic Day augurs well for the political relationship continuing to be on an upswing. Quite apart from that, I don't set too much store by just the fact of the signing of this catch-all agreement, as it's being called. It's a very good thing because in one sense that it implies that from both sides, it implies that we are not really bothered about the number of agreements we sign. We want to get things done.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
One agreement is enough because of, everybody knows the background of India-South Africa relations, the support for the liberation movements and so on and so forth. The South Africans are very fond of saying that you gave us a lawyer called Gandhi, we gave you the Mahatma. So in the years after independence, within the first 10, 15, 18 years, there are agreements and MOUs existing in every sector. So all we need to do now is build on that. And I think the sectors that were mentioned in your report are exactly those sectors in which priority is being given from both sides. The defense cooperation, unlike what many in India, what many in India don't know is that South Africa is a major producer of defense equipment, which in fact certain technologies which even the West, they refined even the technologies of the West that they borrowed,
right?
Because they had to do it under the years of they were under sanctions.
Sure.
So yes, the priority areas mentioned there: trade and economic relations, defense, the blue economy, especially cooperation now in multilateral fora, where because we are so close together, we tend to cooperate.
Absolutely.
Like BRICS, like the Indian Ocean Rim. It's a very active agenda that exists and is strengthened because of this visit.
Sure.
But as always, and it bears repetition, although we all repeat it ad nauseam, everything depends on a sustainable implementation.
Absolutely. There are agreements across sectors is what the ambassador has pointed out. We need to work on the deliverables really going forward is what he's suggesting. Let me bring in the General into the picture now. General, what were the key takeaways from you from a defense and a strategic point of view?
I think what has happened is, and this happened a little bit earlier, it happened in 2018, was the Danelle company of South Africa that was taken away out of the blacklist. Now, if you want to go a little bit into the history, this started actually, there were a series of defense agreements which were signed between India and South Africa during the period 1999 to 2005. And during this period, about 6 odd agreements had been signed. Basically, it pertained to the purchase of the anti-materiel rifle. And we were purchasing, I think, a few hundred of them. And when that got embroiled into a corruption deal.
The bunker busters.
These are the bunker. Actually, when you're looking at the AMR, it has got multiple functions. One is, it's got a range between 1.5 to 2 kilometers. It can destroy a bunker. That is the ammunition which is used. It could also be used against softer targets like vehicles. I mean, not against tanks or something, but against trucks, jeeps, light vehicles, radars, and at some cases, you also use it against snipers. Right. So it depends on the type of ammunition which you use. And this particular thing, we were supposed to get 400 of these AMRs, but we only by the time we had got 100, then the deal got scuttled. And that got scuttled because of the emphasis that money had been paid to outside sources. Now, ultimately, it was found out that there was nothing of this could be proved. And in 2014, a clean chit was given to Danelle. Now, Danelle actually is a government-owned company. It is not a private company. It is a government-owned company. And I'm rather surprised that actually if something like this had happened, it happened with a government-owned company. These things generally happen with private operators. Anyway, from 2014, the sanctions should have been lifted, but it took another 4 years due to various reasons, cases in court, etc. 2018, finally, it was cleared. Now, I think now the time has come and you can once again cooperate with Danelle as far as weapons and ammunition is concerned. In the meantime, India has also started manufacturing the anti-material rifle, and 400 of them have been procured and given to the BSF. The army hasn't taken it on so far. I think that must be, they've got certain sensitivities with respect to the weight and other criteria. But that notwithstanding, I think over a period of time, India should start manufacturing these on its own. We are manufacturing it in one of our ordnance factories, which is being supplied to the BSF. I think the greater thing which cooperation can actually take place now is in the development of ammunition. I think it's a sad state as far as the ordnance factories are concerned, but the way we manufacture our ammunition is really not up to, as of now, world standards. And I think it will be good if both the private sector, Danelle, and some of these ordnance factories, if they could actually get into some sort of cooperative agreement based on what we are really doing now. That the FDI has been opened out, and it is above 50%. So if we can get onto some sort of these structures, South Africa is very good in missiles. They are very good in ammunition. They are very good in artillery guns. Artillery guns, I think it's over now because we have already got the M777. The K9 is on. It's a very good gun. And we've also got our own Indian-made, the Dhanush, which is a copy of the erstwhile Bofors. So as far as artillery is concerned, I think things are looking up for India, and we are doing it indigenously.
Right.
But I think in ammunition and in missile technology, both there could be a lot of inter-cooperation between the two. I think there's also a lot of scope for cooperation in space.
All right.
So that is where I think we need to, as of now, when we're looking at actually defense cooperation between the two countries. We'll talk about exercises a bit later, but I'm talking about the Make in India part of it so far.
Sure.
So in Make in India, I think there's a great deal which can be done, and I think it will benefit both the countries.
Absolutely. You know, Professor, the ambassador touched upon this aspect of it, you know, the historic ties between India and South Africa. Now, that's noteworthy, isn't it?
Yes, this is the 150th anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi and the 100th of Mandela. It's just a great coincidence that these two, you know, great personalities have a round figure of 150 and 100 coinciding in the same year, 2019. So I think the Madiba-Mahatma connection, yes, we continue to emphasize that. But Frank, also even in the civilian side, you see, if you look at India's overall trade with Africa, it's on a growth trajectory. It's like nearly 70 billion US last year. And out of that, more than 10 or close to 10 is contributed only by South Africa. So South Africa is, in terms of the exchange, one of the principal pillars for India's Africa strategy. And that has to do with the history, that has to do with the migration patterns. We have nearly 1.5 million people of Indian origin in South Africa, many of whom fought against apartheid and were very close associates of Nelson Mandela. And we also want to talk about, you know, agriculture and industry, because this, you remember 2018, Frank, Prime Minister laid out our 10-point guidelines for what India wants to do in Africa. And it's a very important marker in our maturation of our Africa policy. And one of the points he said was that, you know, that Africa is 60% of the world's arable land, but it produces only 10% of the world's agriculture output, and we want to support enhancement of that. So a number of Indian companies are involved in, you know, taking land and for commercial farming and then exporting the produce from Africa back to India as well as to other parts of the world. Some of them have been successful companies, a few have been controversial. But overall, that's one contribution. The other, of course, is with industry, I mean, and services also. You look at a company like Bharti, for example, they have 78 million subscribers in Africa, including in parts of West Africa like Ghana, Nigeria, you know, so essentially, and then you look at the Pan-African e-network and other ways by which India is connecting Africa. That's a huge contribution we're doing, and they value us a lot. And last but not least is, you come to the defense, you see the emphasis on naval cooperation. I see that it has been increased lately with South Africa. And the reason for that is obvious. One, you know, we say that we are against non-traditional threats like piracy and, you know, drug smuggling and human smuggling and those kind of things. But the unstated objective is, of course, that we want to preserve a kind of Indian Ocean that we say is free of any kind of hegemonic players. And the advancement of the People's Liberation Army Navy in this region is quite high. They have, you know, this is part of the Belt and Road for them initiative. And it's part of the maritime commons where they are increasingly, muscling through. So I think it's important for us to show that we are also cognizant of the western flank of the Indian Ocean. And you see the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium and Indian Ocean Rim Association. Both of these had India and South Africa almost as co-founders. South Africa from the beginning, you know, has been wanting India to be there so as not to be falling into, you know, the lap of the Chinese, so to say, although they do have very strong, you know, Chinese connections and investments and loans as well. So I think Rwanda and South Africa, Frank, these are the two officially stated strategic partners for India in Africa. And I think we should expand it to Nigeria and to Ghana as well, which is a little further away. And then we will have a series of capable states with whom we have a strong strategic understanding. When we say strategic relations, it's different from, you know, simply having trade and commerce, right? So we are talking about defense plus trade plus people to people, and of course reforming the international institutions. South Africa is one of the contenders to have the permanent seat in the UN Security Council along with Nigeria, and we have often been coordinating with them. So you look at all of these, there's great convergence of interests.
Absolutely. There is great, convergence really as far as both the countries are concerned. But Ambassador,